investing really in Nigeria's history. The first, by and large, was in the First Republic, and most of that work occurred in the Western region under, late Chief Obafemi Awolowo. The second period, amazingly, of infrastructure investing in Nigeria was a period after the first Gulf War under the Babangida regime. Since then and until now, we haven't really done enough outside of Lagos State on investing in infrastructure across this country. Infrastructure is so central to everything. Without infrastructure, you cannot attract investments. Without investments, you cannot create jobs. And jobs is what a country that has a massive young population, that has such a significant population like ours, requires. Infrastructure provides the basis for that. Without infrastructure, you cannot educate a population properly in the 21st century. The bulk of education today happens on the internet. How many children in Nigeria today have access to the internet? Yeah? How can you develop a country, educate its people, and raise their quality of life if you do not invest in infrastructure? So when people talk about all the things they must do to foster sustainable growth in this market, and they don't realize the centrality and the criticality of infrastructure in that process.
Well, let's get back to the budget. $2 billion for October is a drop in the ocean. You wouldn't even say it.
It's scraping the surface.
It's scraping the surface. So you bring in the private sector.
Yeah.
Do you think the private sector has the money, both locally, and how would you attract this money if we don't have it at home from overseas?
So the way you must look at it basically is that you must take small steps which basically show the way. And those small steps then create the basis for other people to enter the sector and to bring further capital. The bulk of that capital will come from domestic and international markets. Globally, what we've seen over the last 20 years, but even more importantly since the global financial crisis, is that pension funds have become a tremendously large source of financing for infrastructure. And Nigeria is fortunate to have very, very strong, and really creative regulation around the pension industry, which has created the basis today. What we must now do as intermediaries is to create the products, and this is really what the Nigeria Infrastructure Debt Fund represents. It represents a small start, but a very significant start, which in the fullness of time will come to be recognized as a big day in the financing of infrastructure in Nigeria.
I've got a couple of questions for some of the folks who are involved in this, but as the Chief Managing Director and Chief Executive of Chapel Hill Denham, at what point did you folks sit down across the boardroom and the board table and they said, look, we need to do something on infrastructure and this is how we should proceed with it? And do you think 200 billion is quite ambitious?
So over 2 years ago, we started to think about doing something, and one of the first conversations I had was with my partner in launching this fund, Phil Southwell, and we talked about how can we do something that is significant, that grows over time and becomes very, very sustainable, large and liquid. And we basically came about the idea of creating an infrastructure debt fund, and the idea was to do it in local currency. And why is local currency important? Yeah? Many people tend to operate under the mistaken myth that the right currency to finance infrastructure in is US dollars or foreign currency. You only have to look at the debris that is occurring around the privatized power assets to understand, or even the recent telecoms failure that we have had in the market, to understand how dangerous foreign currency can be in financing infrastructure. The right currency in which to finance infrastructure is local currency, but long-term local currency. And this is what we've sought to do. It's basically to recognize that the pension funds are a massive pool of significant long-term local currency assets. They need yield. Infrastructure as an asset class actually is a very safe, low-risk, stable, income-generating asset class when it is operating and when well done. It's compatible with the objectives of the pension funds, but the pension funds have to climb a learning curve around the asset class. And the reality of it today is that even globally, in countries where pension funds have been investing in infrastructure for nearly 2 decades, there's still a tremendous amount of investor education and buy-side education that needs to be done. But once you open that pipe, and this is really what this initiative is about, it's about using this platform to crowd in pension and other institutional money into infrastructure. That pipe can become as large as you wish.
Out of the pipeline, because Lunge and the rest of his team are sitting on 6 trillion naira. Yep. That's almost about 95% of Nigeria's budget. So that's a lot of money. We've got to get you to speak later within the 2 hours.
Yes.
We've got to let you go at this point. I'm interested in Lunge bringing the money to the table.
Fantastic.
You provided the background. I love the background. I think everybody loves the story. But I need to speak to the man who has the money. And that's Lunge, who is the managing director at ICO Pension PFA, and of course who is the chairman of the pension operators of Nigeria called PENOP, and is the man who is coming live here to talk to us after this time out. We're going to take about 2 minutes break. We'll be right back, and we'll have the pension funds investors conversation, those who have the deep pockets and how much money they'll be bringing in and why are they interested in infrastructure. We'll be right back.
Thank you very much.